it's Michelle Caruana from Play Cafe Academy and Profitable Play, and I am here with an update video answering one of the most common questions that I get from prospective owners, and that is, what does it cost to open an indoor playground or a play cafe right now? Now, I say this is an update video because the first version of this video I did was way back in 2019. Then I did an update in 2022. And now I feel like enough has changed in the industry where I absolutely needed to make an update. So I'm so excited for this video. But if you're new to me or new to this channel, hi, my name is Michelle Caruana. I opened my indoor playground in 2015. I sold it 5 years later. And since I sold my brick and mortar business, I have created a brand new full-time business helping prospective owners like you open and operate profitable, keyword, profitable indoor playground and play cafe businesses. And I do that through my YouTube channel, which you're watching right now, my Profitable Play podcast, and all of the resources that you can find at michellecaruana.com. And everything that you hear about today, I will link in the video description. And before we get started, if you're wondering why you should trust me or any of the information in this video or my resources, again, since I sold my brick and mortar business, this is now what I do full time. I only consult with indoor playground businesses, and I have thousands of clients all around the world. I have clients with all different business models of all different sizes who serve different niches, who have different types of play. I really serve a wide range. So I feel like I have a really unique perspective in this industry as both an owner myself, as someone who has a master's degree in economics and has worked in corporate marketing, and again, who has spent the last decade serving owners in this industry. All right, now that we got that out of the way, I'm not going to bury the lead here. What I am seeing now with the hundreds of clients I am currently working with to open, I am seeing costs to open all in, so including everything, range from around $250,000 to $750,000. That is the range I would say 90% of the people that I am working with are falling within. Now you might be thinking, geez, that is a big range. And I promise you, we are going to get to all of the information in detail to back up what I just said, first of all, and also to help you find where you might fall on that very wide spectrum. But before we get there, I want to let you know that, of course, there will be outliers, right? So 10% of the people that I work with fall outside of this range. I work with some multi-million-dollar facilities that are sprawling 25,000 square feet of gross motor structures and zip lines and arcades and things like that. Those are, of course, going to cost more. And I also work with some very boutique therapy clinics that are 800 square feet, serve a very specific niche, did not need a lot of gross motor structures or anything like that because, again, they run a very specific business model. So there are outliers, but 90% of the people that I work with, again, their facilities are costing all in between $250,000 and $750,000. And before we get into where those numbers are coming from, I want to talk really quickly about what has changed in this industry because, as I mentioned in the beginning, enough has changed where I felt like I needed to make an update in this video. And the first thing that has changed is drastically increased competition. Now, this is due to a few reasons, right? There are a lot of business vacancies due to the pandemic and the economy. So a lot of businesses closed, creating these vacancies. And that combined with the rise of the Play Cafe indoor playground content creator has made a lot of people acquire this dream of owning an indoor play space of their own someday. And that's why you're seeing play cafes, indoor play spaces. Again, I'm going to use all of those terms interchangeably just for the sake of this video. You're probably seeing them pop up all over the place. It's not just you, they are popping up everywhere. And with that increased competition comes increased stakes. You now need to spend more in order to stand out from your competition, to command market share from your potential customers. And second thing, this kind of brings me to my next point. The second thing that has changed, in addition to increased competition, is increased expectations of parents from social media, right? So we have a lot of thinking to do from TikTok and Instagram for these changes. And this is no slight to the indoor playground play cafe creators. A lot of my clients are creators. This is no slight to them, but just the nature of social media often causes us as outsiders, as people scrolling, to look at people's lives, or in this case, people's businesses, through rose-colored glasses, because a lot of us are only sharing what we want people to see, right? So again, All of this combined has led to increased competition, and social media has also led to heightened expectations from parents because they're seeing all these beautiful, thoughtfully designed, highly aesthetic play spaces, some of which cost millions and millions of dollars and are owned by private equity or are owned by big chains and are often very difficult to compete with. But again, just to be honest and to take off those rose colored glasses, it is very difficult right now to meet these expectations that parents have thanks to social media. And all of this factor into increased startup costs compared to what we were seeing just a couple years ago. So increased competition, increased expectations, and then also inflation and increased costs, right? Everything naturally increases, but in the last couple years, due to tariffs, administration changes, supply issues. There have been so many things that have come up that have drastically increased different contractor costs, different supply costs, finishing costs, equipment costs. A lot of things have changed and things are more expensive than ever. So again, I really felt like I needed to make this video so that you were absolutely prepared if you wanted to enter this industry. Okay, now that we got that out of the way, I wanted to talk about the 4 biggest factors that are going to impact where you fall on that range that I talked about just a few minutes ago, the 250 to 750,000 range. Where are you going to fall on that spectrum? Here are the 4 biggest factors. Number 1, your location. If you are in a very expensive area, not only is your rent going to be high, it's also going to be a lot more costly to build out your facility. So contractors, sometimes delivery, sometimes utilities are going to be increased in those areas. So just be very prepared for that. The same exact facility is going to cost drastically different if it's in rural Indiana compared to Metro New York City. So just be prepared for that. The second is the type of play and age range that you plan to serve. So if you're planning to, open a therapy clinic and just have a few manipulatives and toys from Amazon, your costs are obviously going to be a lot different than if you're going to be investing in a custom, beautiful, multi-story gross motor play structure that ranges from 0 to 16 years of age. So you have to factor in what type of play you want. So gross motor versus imaginative or both. Or, there's even VR type facilities, things like that, and what age range you plan to serve. And then that brings me to the next point. The third factor is the size of your space. So different age ranges are, of course, going to take up space differently. So the broader age range you serve, yes, the more money you're going to be able to make, but the bigger size space you're going to need. And bigger space means increased costs of everything. So yes, obviously rent, but also staffing, cleaning, utilities, flooring, painting, furniture, equipment, security, insurance, especially. Every cost is going to increase the more square footage that you add to your space. So again, location, type of play and age range, size of your space, and then finally, and this is a new addition for this update video because I think it's really important to mention, is the scope of work that your space is going to need. And now I want to kind of dive into this one a little bit deeper. So if you are currently looking for a location, if you got distracted, come back because this is going to be really important because this is going to make a huge difference when it comes to where you fall on that range that I talked about. So there are a couple big ticket items that will drastically increase your startup costs. Now, the first is going to be adding a cafe or kitchen. So equipment, plumbing, venting, grease traps, sinks, refrigerators, counters, all of that. If you are having to add a cafe or a kitchen from scratch in your facility, it is going to cost on average, again, on average, between 20 to 100,000 plus, depending on scale, complexity, how much plumbing and electrical work you need, all of that. So again, keep that in mind when you're looking for spaces. It is definitely best to find a space that has all of this work done previously. There are ways to get around or reduce these costs, which we're going to talk about. But if you have to add a cafe from scratch, just know it's going to be extremely expensive to do so. Next is a sprinkler system. Some of these older buildings do not have sprinkler systems, and you may not need it to operate. However, if you're going to start knocking down walls in these older buildings without sprinkler systems, that may trigger the need to add a sprinkler system. So make sure you have a contractor that you're working with when you're scouting locations or an architect so that they can help you understand your local rules and regulations and what changes that you want to make to these interior spaces and what codes that might affect. Because a new sprinkler system, depending on, again, the complexity and size, could cost between $5,000 and $40,000. Back in 2015, one of the spaces that we were looking at needed a brand new sprinkler system, and they quoted us $40,000 because the fire hydrant was like really, really far away, and they would need to do all sorts of like sidewalk tearing and all sorts of stuff. So we said absolutely no to that location, but I'm so glad I did that research beforehand. You want to make sure, again, you're working with these types of contractors and people beforehand so that before you put pen to paper and sign that lease, you know what you're in for in terms of startup costs. The next big ticket item is adding emergency exits or any egress updates, because that's going to cost between $5,000 and $25,000 depending on what you need to add. So panic hardware, ramps, stair escapes, again, exit signage, or adding entire doors. If you start knocking down walls, again, it might trigger the need for additional emergency exits. Or if you add walls, you may need additional emergency exits. So make sure you keep that in mind because, again, that gets very expensive. And that brings me to the next point, which is ADA accessibility and compliance. Now, again, a lot of these older buildings, you are grandfathered in and you don't necessarily need to be ADA accessible in order to open. However, as an advocate for the disability community, I highly recommend at a bare minimum being ADA compliant. You, of course, want to look into universal design and being inclusive over just accessible. And I have tons of resources on that. I also work with tons of experts that I've interviewed on my channels about how to be as inclusive and accessible as possible. But again, at the bare minimum, I recommend always creating an ADA compliant atmosphere. So again, even though you technically can, like a lot in this industry, doesn't mean you should. So being ADA compliant, if your building isn't already so, is going to be really expensive. So I highly recommend choosing a facility that already has things like ramps, correct door widths, the modified entrances if needed. All of that, you want to make sure that they already have it unless you have the extra budget to add those accessible features. Next is any electrical or power upgrades. So again, if you're knocking down walls, if you're adding commercial machinery to a kitchen, or if you are in an area with extreme weather, and again, you're knocking down walls, you have high ceilings, you need to cool and heat that big facility, you're probably going to need to upgrade your electrical work, which can cost between $20,000 and $40,000 for a very average size space. If it's going to be bigger, it can be way more than that. So just be prepared. Now, the next couple of things I want to talk about, I don't know if I would necessarily say are really big ticket, but they're things that come up all the time in my one-on-one consultations and in my group coaching program called Playmaker Society for indoor playground owners. The first of these kind of secondary things I want to talk about is flooring, because a lot of people, have done house remodels and they will be working on their business plan off of those numbers. But commercial grade flooring and residential flooring are completely different. Same with kitchen equipment, right? A home dishwasher could be $2,000, where a commercial one is closer to $20,000 if you get one with sanitizing and all that stuff. So you want to make sure you're always looking at commercial grade paint, commercial grade flooring. And commercial grade flooring can be around $14 per square foot. And if you have a 3,000 square foot space, that's going to be close to $50,000. And that can be just for materials, not even including padding, insulation, any of that. Like if you want those, nice cushy rubber floors, if you're going to be doing a lot of gross motor play, commercial flooring gets extremely expensive. So just a quick reminder to always be looking at the commercial grade materials, or else your facility will just fall apart within a year. Next is parking and zoning compliance. I have had a couple clients need to add parking in order to be compliant. A lot of them had to rezone from like residential to commercial or retail, and they had to create additional parking, and that can get very expensive. And then finally, we have security and IT infrastructure. So again, if you're wanting a security camera angle of every nook and cranny of your space, if you have a 6,000 square foot facility, and if you have party rooms and an office and a sensory room and things like that, that can get up into the tens of thousands, depending on how high tech you want to be. But I did just want to mention. Okay, so those are some high ticket items that can drastically affect your build out cost. And your build out cost is, of course, going to be one of your biggest, if not the biggest chunk of your startup costs. But what else are you going to have to pay for? Let's go line by line. And by the way, I'm reading line by line right now from my business plan toolkit. So if you're interested, again, it's linked in the video description. It's extremely affordable. So if you're interested in saving thousands of dollars and thousands of hours on creating your business plan by simply using my proven award-winning template that has gotten millions of dollars of funding for owners just like you, from investors, grants, crowdfunding, banks, all sorts of places. Again, it's only $27. It comes with a 70-minute training to help you fill it out section by section. And it's the most affordable tool that I have to ensure that you're setting your business up for success from the beginning. Because again, before you put pen to paper and sign your lease, you want to have a completed, at least first version of your business plan. It is so extremely important that you understand what your numbers are going to look like, when you're going to be profitable, so that you understand what you're committing to. Because if you break your lease, it can be financially devastating. And I do have a video all about that because unfortunately, I have helped many clients go through the closing, the selling of their business, the breaking of their lease, and I don't want that for you. So again, we're going to go line by line through some of the costs that you can expect to factor into that $250,000 to $750,000. The first, like I already said, is going to be your build out cost. So interior modifications like build out, floors, paint, counters, cabinets, all of that. You're going to need to pay for your legal, your business incorporation, and your licenses. If you're negotiating your lease, and you should always hire a lawyer to negotiate your lease, please, it's going to get very expensive, especially if you're having to go through several rounds of lease negotiations, or if you're looking at multiple locations, your legal fees can get up there. So I would recommend looking for a real estate lawyer who charges a flat fee potentially for lease negotiations, so that you don't feel like you're having to settle or like you're having to hold back on your negotiations. Because something that I'm going to talk about in just a minute is tenant credits, because some of those high ticket items can be paid for by your landlord, but you really need to have a good lawyer in your corner. So if you don't want to pay way too much by going through all of these different rounds of negotiations and different iterations of the lease, make sure that you have this in your budget and try to find a lawyer that has a flat fee for lease negotiations. But make sure you hire one that is real estate specific, or else something's going to be missed. And signing a bad lease is the first nail in the coffin of a failed business. And it can also be the final nail. It is so important to choose the best location and sign a good lease. Off my soapbox now. Next is business banking. It's not going to be a big cost, but it does cost money. Next is legal fees and permits. So if you need to apply for any health department permits, or if you need to rezone, anything like that, it can be very expensive and very time consuming. You may need to hire an accountant to help you with your financial projections. You will need to pay typically first and at least last month's rent. Some landlords require more than that. Some require a personal guarantee, but again, that's a line item on your costs. Your play area equipment, of course, that can be hundreds of thousands of dollars. If you're looking for, like, for example, a custom, let's say, play structure for, let's say, a 2,000 square foot play area, you're looking at probably between $200,000 and $500,000 just for the play structure, not for anything else, just for the play structure. I've seen smaller spaces, maybe around 2,000 square feet, get really beautiful structures built from one of my favorite vendors, Tiger Play, for between $100,000 and $150,000, but that's really the minimum if you want something like that. And again, because of increased competition, you cannot just rent a space, buy a bunch of toys off Amazon by Melissa and Doug, or anything that people have in their homes and expect to be successful. You just can't. You need to invest in a professional, commercial grade structure, ideally one that is custom made for your business to really stand out and to be successful in this industry. I'm not saying it's 100% of the time, but again, for the average indoor playground. So the play area equipment, coffee equipment and machinery, and kitchen equipment. I bought all of mine secondhand because unfortunately, a lot of cafes, a lot of restaurants closed. So there is a really thriving secondhand market for this type of equipment. And a lot of times what I did is I purchased them from a certified reseller. So they were able to extend the warranty of the equipment. They refurbished everything, and I was really happy with all of the equipment I made, but I still spent over $50,000 on just my kitchen and cafe equipment. Now, I still always recommend adding a cafe. I have resources on that I will link if you're interested in digging more into why I recommend that. But it paid for itself within the first couple months, and I never regretted it. I'm telling you right now, I would have not have been able to sell my business successfully for a profit or pay myself substantially if I didn't have my cafe. So it cost around $50,000, but it was worth every penny. Next is insurance. Some insurances will, again, take a 12-month premium, which can be tens of thousands of dollars depending on the size of your space, type of equipment, all that, how much you're projecting to make. So you may need to account for a 12-month insurance premium for business liability insurance. There are all different types of insurances that you need that I cover on this channel. Or, by the way, something that I didn't mention at the beginning of this video, I have a signature program called Play Cafe Academy that is truly your A to Z resource on everything you could ever need to open and operate a profitable indoor playground. It has not only step-by-step instructions and over 80 video lessons with picture examples and things like that. There's also hundreds of downloadable resources like employee guides, training manuals, standard operating procedures, task lists, contracts, marketing materials, literally everything you need to run your business that you can brand for yourself, plug and play into your business, and save, again, thousands of hours and thousands of dollars on creating those assets yourself. And they are proven. Hundreds of people have used them successfully. I am so proud of it. I update the program all the time to be the most accurate and thorough training in the industry. And I've worked with CPAs, lawyers, and a full team of experts, as well as the experience of myself and my hundreds of clients to create this robust program. Again, that's linked in the video description. But again, I know I got off track there, but if you're looking for more information about what types of insurances you're going to need, there are many different kinds. That's in the program, but you can also find some basic information on my YouTube channel. Next is if you want loyalty key tags and supporting software, as well as any point of sale equipment, so your registers, any mobile checkouts, things like that. Business cards, brochures, paper flyers, any advertising, pre-marketing. Furniture is going to be a really big cost because, again, you want to buy commercial and not residential, or else everything's going to fall out. Paper goods, silverware, plates, maintenance items, cleaning supplies, opening inventory like coffee, retail, things like that. Signage. Signage is a sneaky one that can be tens of thousands of dollars. Back in 2015, our sign cost $13,000 because it had to be backlit. That was a requirement from the plaza that we were in. I didn't know that when I signed my lease. I ended up getting my landlord to pay for half of it because he didn't disclose that in the lease. But again, signage can be really sneaky. Wi-Fi and security, employee acquisition, employee training, and working capital is very important. You want to make sure you put working capital into your business plan because you never know what's going to happen in the first couple months. You want to have at least 3 months of expenses as backup, as cushion and working capital in the bank in case something doesn't go according to plan. Stuff happens. There's always going to be a surprise cost. There's always going to be a delay. There's always going to be something unexpected. Just listen to the coaching calls that I have on my podcast that I have with real life indoor playground owners. There's always something. You need to have working capital built into your business plan, at least 3 months of total expenses in order for me to feel safe for you. Now, when it comes to estimating costs for each of these line items, there's no easy way. There's no shortcut. You simply need to pick up the phone in your local area and call people for quotes. You can work with a general contractor who can help you with a lot of it. You can work with a consultant. You can work with an architect who can help you with a lot of this, especially when it comes to coding and build out and things like that. Oftentimes you will have to work with an architect. You can work with an interior designer that can help you with a lot of it. But there's no shortcut. You need to pick up the phone. It is so important to have accurate numbers in your business plan before you sign a lease. Now, there's often a lot of confusion. How do I make a business plan until I sign a lease? Think of your business plan as a living, breathing document. It's never truly completed. So every single location that you're seriously considering, so, your lawyer's going over the lease, you're, taking clauses out, adding clauses, things like that. Any location that you're seriously considering, you need to complete a business plan for. You need to create not just a startup cost line item, but also a P&L. You need to come up with an income statement. You need to come up with cash flow projections. And again, if you need help with any of that, I have all of those financial projections plug and play style that you can just boop, boop, boop. The formulas are already there in my Play Cafe Academy program. If this is not your strong suit, again, I went to graduate school, so you don't have to. And on top of that, because actually spreadsheets are not my strong suit, I hired a CPA to develop a plug and play financial projection spreadsheet for all of the things that I just mentioned to make sure that you feel good about your business because you're committing a lot of your livelihood to this. So make sure you have at least a draft of your business plan for each location that you seriously consider. You want to make sure it actually works before you put pen to paper. So once you start seriously considering a space, figure out the square footage, figure out the county it's in, and again, just pick up the phone and start calling. There's nothing glamorous about this part, but again, you can save a ton of time and effort if you are a member of my program, and I'd love to help you. So the next thing that I want to talk about is tenant credits, because a lot of those high ticket items that I mentioned, the HVAC, adding a cafe, adding bathrooms. Actually, I think I might have forgot to talk about adding bathrooms, but adding bathrooms are another big ticket item that can be $20,000 to $50,000 depending on how many bathrooms you need to add. And that isn't even including like the finishings, paint, light fixtures, toilets, floors, anything like that. That's just like the plumbing and the base work to create a vanilla box bathroom, meaning you're going to add the finishings after the fact. So a lot of these high ticket items can be paid for you through tenant credits. So what are tenant credits? Basically, when you sign a commercial lease, the landlord may give you some money, i.e. a credit, to help cover part of your build out costs, any costs that are at the building level. So for example, bathrooms, sprinkler system, HVAC, electrical, anything like that, anything that can be used by a future tenant, they may be willing to pay for it in the form of tenant credits. Now, this can work all different ways in practice. So I want to give you a couple examples of ways that my real life clients have gotten tenant credits. So sometimes instead of paying you directly, like writing you a check for $100,000 for new bathrooms, a lot of times they'll either pay contractors specifically. So you'll go to them, you'll say, hey, my lawyer says I need to add 2 bathrooms in order for this building to be up to code. Either they'll say, go F yourself. And then at that point, you'll just want to abandon lease negotiations and find a new location. It's always better to wait for the perfect location. Or they'll say, okay, I'll give you $50,000 for a bathroom. I'll pay for 50% of it, right? They'll give you some sort of number. There will be some negotiation and they'll usually pay the contractor directly. Or they'll say, I'm not going to pay that, but I will reduce your rent by 50% or by 20%, or I'll give you 3 months free rent instead of paying for the bathrooms, right? There are a lot of different ways that this can work. Those are just a few ways I've seen in person. Or sometimes what they will do is they will pay for it. So they'll work with a contractor and they'll say, well, you need to give me something for that. I need you to sign a 10-year lease if I'm going to pay for all these building upgrades instead of a 5-year lease. Or I'm going to need a personal guarantee on this lease, meaning, if you default on your lease, they're going to come after your house, they're going to come after your personal assets. A lot of leases already require a personal guarantee, but sometimes, again, if a landlord is having to invest a lot in tenant credits and building level improvements, they will ask for that personal guarantee, or, they will ask for an increased rent if they are going to pay for those upgrades directly. They'll say, okay, well, your rent's going to go from $10,000 a month to $15 a month. Or again, there's going to be some sort of a trade-off, but the best you can convince your landlord that it's going to be a win-win to add a bathroom, to add a sprinkler system, to become ADA compliant, the more likely they are to concede and give you those tenant credits. And of course, obviously, the more tenant credits you get, the more budget you can reallocate to play equipment, to hiring an interior designer so that you can stand out against your competition, to hiring a branding expert to make sure your marketing is on point, to buying that commercial grade flooring and all of that. So tenant credits are really important and a very key part of lease negotiations. And this is a really common thing that we talk about in Playmaker Society, which again is my group coaching program. There's almost 400 indoor playground owners in it as we speak. It is my favorite corner of the internet. We collaborate, share tips, tricks, what's working, what's not working. We do live events. We do a conference every year. So again, all that information is linked in the video description, but don't forget to negotiate your tenant credits, especially if one of those high ticket items is causing you to be on the higher end of the spectrum. Okay, lastly, I want to talk about some really common mistakes that I have seen. Again, I've worked with thousands of indoor playground owners. These are some really common mistakes that I've seen people make when they're estimating their startup costs. Number one, like I said, not completing their business plan before signing a lease or not getting real quotes. They're getting a quote from someone on TikTok or, oh, so and so's business costs this much, or this play structure costs this much. It could be from 2018, or it could be, on the other side of the country, or it could have been before the tariffs were imposed. Use real numbers for your business plan and make sure that business plan is completed. Again, at least the first draft before you sign a lease and before you take out a loan, before you have a firm startup cost number. So get real numbers. Next is people will cut corners on their build out. So they'll find their dream space. They'll realize, oh gosh, it needs a new HVAC system, or, this floor is going to cost a lot more. And they'll end up straying from their original vision. And they'll quite frankly end up with a business that they resent, that they hate, and is so far from their original vision that they don't enjoy running it and they immediately want to sell it. But by that point, it's not profitable enough. They're going to take a loss on it and they could be financially devastated. So it's worth it to wait for the perfect location. It's worth it to go through rounds and rounds of negotiation to get those tenant credits so that you do not have to compromise on your vision. I've talked to so many owners and worked with so many owners who have waited 5+ years for the perfect location or to get the right amount of funding so that they don't have to sacrifice. Not a single one of them has regretted waiting or holding out for the perfect location. However, I have worked with many owners who have jumped the gun, signed a lease too early, not flushed out their numbers properly, and are now up to their necks in debt. They want to get out. They hate their business. They are so jaded. They are so resentful of what they have created. And that is not what I want for you. It's not what I want for any owner in this industry. The next mistake is forgetting things like employee acquisition and pre-opening payroll, things like that. It can cost a lot to hire, to train, to do a soft opening, things that are going to happen before you start generating real money. Now, of course, I teach pre-opening sales, founding memberships, pre-opening party bookings, and things like that. But just know it does cost quite a bit to find, hire, and train employees. So a lot of people forget that. I don't want you to be one of them. Next is overlooking hidden costs. So again, things I mentioned like signage, security systems, insurance. A lot of people have no idea how much commercial business liability insurance is. Kitchen equipment, those high ticket items that can drastically increase your build out costs. Make sure you understand, and whether you're learning from me or you're learning from another mentor in this industry, make sure you are not leaving any stone unturned, because again, this is your life and your livelihood we're talking about here, and it's going to be the livelihood of your children. So you want to make sure you're doing all the research possible. And then lastly, I see a lot of people not putting working capital in their business plan. That is a massive mistake. Something, again, is always going to happen. There's always going to be an unexpected cost. For example, we opened 3 months late because the day they were supposed to pour my building's foundation, the ground froze. I lived in Rochester, New York at the time. It was like October, so it was way cold for the season. It was unseasonably freezing, and they had to wait months to pour the foundation. We lost so much revenue. We were paying rent on those months. It was just a mess. And we did have, a couple rent-free months worked into our build out, not enough. So there's things that you just really can't control. So always having a cushion, being extremely conservative with your estimates, overestimating every cost, building in cushions, having working capital is so crucially important. And before I end this video, I just want to leave you with a couple things. Again, be extremely realistic with your budget and always have a cushion. Number two, do not force your vision into an ill-fitting space. So again, don't cut corners on your build out, on branding, on interior design, on your equipment. You will end up paying for it in the long run. Again, what you get out of this business is directly in line with what you're willing to invest in the business. The people that I see struggle the most are people that were not willing to invest a lot in their business or cut those corners, or again, bought those prefab cookie cutter structures that everybody has. That's not going to cut it in 2026 and beyond. You need to be more unique in order to stand out. And that means unique structures, interior designers, branding experts, all of them. Next is complete your dang business plan before you sign a thing. Prioritize customer and staff experience from day one. Make sure you're working with someone who understands the flow of a successful play cafe, where the check-in desk should be, where the bathroom should be, if your play area should be gated or not based on your location and style and size and your building codes. If you should have party rooms, how many, where should they be located? There is so much that factors into customer experience. And if you don't hire a professional or work with a mentor in this industry, you are going to regret it and you will end up paying for it later. So, again, some of these corners that you're cutting now are going to come back tenfold and cost you tenfold in the long run. Trust me, I've seen it time and time again. And I'm not saying you need to invest in my program, but I would recommend hiring an expert, not just someone who has worked in their own business, but someone who has worked with many businesses in this industry, because it is counterintuitive and it is highly nuanced. Right, that's it for today. Just a few notes on some resources if you want to continue learning about this. I have a free training all about funding. So once you pick up the phone and estimate your startup costs, if you want to learn how to get funded in this industry, I have a free training I will link in the video description. And if you want, again, my fastest, most cost-effective shortcut to success in this counterintuitive, highly nuanced, extremely competitive, very difficult industry, I would love to welcome you into Play Cafe Academy. It's just playcafeacademy.com. And then all Play Cafe Academy students get an invite into my group coaching program, Playmakers Society, for indoor playground owners. We would love to welcome you with open arms into our community of collaboration and help and support. And we would love to be that for you in this industry, because it can be incredibly isolating and lonely if you're not working with the right people. You can subscribe to this channel, of course. You can listen to my podcast, the Profitable Play Podcast, anywhere you get podcasts. And again, all of my resources, both free and paid, can be found at michellecaruana.com. All right, bye for now.